Welcome to the Pure Property Podcast. Whether you are considering buying your first investment property or reaching property mogul status, we dissect the fundamentals through to large-scale property development and everything in between.
G'day, how you going? Phil Tarrant, co-host of the Pure Property Podcast with Paul Glossop, who is back in Australia. I hear he's been out working on research on his next release of his book, The Surface Guide to Property Investment. And it's not the first one, it's not the second one. I think there may be a third one. And you can always say the best buyers agents are those who get on the ground and actually have a look around and have ground truth. Well, if you're writing books about surfing and property, you probably need to get out and about as well, particularly some of the greatest waves in the world, he tells me. Where you been? Paul Glossop, by the way. Director of Pure Property Investment.
Thank you for this sloppy intro as always, Philip.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate it. I have been sunning myself up in the sunny and very turquoise water of the Maldives.
Okay.
It was quite the surf trip. It wasn't the probably the quintessential Maldivian sitting in the overwater bungalow sort of trip. It was more just with a group of lads and a little bit of a surf getaway. And waves were pumping.
Surf camp, was it?
Surf camp, yeah. Pretty basic accommodation for the most part. Very beautiful setting.
Not the 5 stars you'd be used to.
It's definitely not the 6 stars that you're used to.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. No Bollinger and very basic Changi on tap.
Changi on tap. Changi on tap. Yeah, okay. How'd you get there? Through Singapore?
Through Singapore, yeah. Singapore, then to Malé, then straight onto a boat, straight into the waves.
Okay. So you had to get a boat to an island.
To an island?
Yeah.
Well, Maldives are just islands.
Yeah,
That's all that's there.
Yeah, from the capital to another island. And then just sat around and surfed.
Yep.
Okay.
Polished off a couple of frosty beverages and ate some relatively spicy curries.
Okay.
Yep.
Any inspiration for another
there definitely is
edition of
definitely is.
the
Maybe a property / surfing retreat. Maybe just do another one of those. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's where it is.
We actually spoke about doing something.
We
like
did.
that.
We did. I'll tell you what, it's a good spot for it. It's an excellent spot for it.
It's just hard to get there, and it's a long time.
It's a lot of stuff. Yeah. It's not a regular occurrence for me, but
no.
certainly enjoyable.
Would you go back to the Maldives?
I definitely would. Yeah. Good people, beautiful spot. Probably my first time, and more of an eye opener. I thought it'd be a bit more plastic and a bit more Dubai-esque, if you know what I mean. A bit more of that sort of. And don't get me wrong, I think when we're surfing, you would go past other places on the boats when you go into different points and different breaks. And there's places that are 50, 100 grand a night type of, proper oligarch types of money. And there's a whole raft of 100-metre yachts sitting in certain harbours there where you realise that there's billionaire wealth sitting out there. And that's not for me, but the actual place in general had a good vibe. Really chill, cruisy, my kind of life.
I see Jeff Bezos has given up his fancy boat. He's selling it because he's sick of the attention.
Oh, really?
The world's biggest sailing yacht.
Right. This is the same guy who shut down an Italian city for his wedding. Sick of the attention.
Yeah. And this is the same guy who got chased out of town, I think somewhere in the Netherlands, where they built this boat originally because he wanted to dismantle the bridge so he could actually get the boat out.
This is a sailing boat, right? This is the one with the big mast, etc. Yeah, no doubt.
And the tender is as big as the sailing boat, and they actually have to put the heliport on the tender. So he's decided to get rid of it because it's attracting too much attention.
Too much attention. Yeah, no. But that wasn't obvious when he was going through the construction phase of a 300-metre yacht with masts probably the same height.
It's a beautiful boat.
I don't doubt it. What $500 million can get you is probably quite a lot.
Yeah. Anyway,
on your shopping list, Philip?
Maybe, but
yes.
Well, coming into
not with the negative gearing changes, you're going to be broke.
Attracting unwanted attention. I think a lot of property investors would actually feel at the moment that they're attracting a lot of attention unnecessarily. And that's the sentiment, that's the feeling I'm getting. I know a lot of property investors are sitting there going, why does it feel as though all the wrongs of Australia and all the wrongs of the inflationary environment we're operating in, all the wrongs of the government's inability to balance its books is being pointed at property. That's how property investors feel at the moment.
Absolutely.
You know, and you sort of get it, right? And it's certainly, property investment has been weaponized, and no one's really talking about this.
Getting ahead's a problem.
It's been weaponized as a vehicle by the government to divide Australians for the purpose of them cultivating votes into the future. And unfortunately, that's where we are with it right now. And as we look down the barrel of a federal budget in 4 days' time, Tuesday of next week, You know, is there going to be a lot of property investors who are going to feel blighted by the fact that they've gone about trying to invest in their future, create wealth for themselves, and not going to be relying on the government at a point in time when they choose to retire, and a lot of that's going to be changed and manufactured in a way in which, you know, you've got one cohort of Australians who are going to feel hard done by, and then another cohort of Australians probably going to be celebrating.
And the irony, I think, Philip, of this is that isn't. I mean, obviously, this is being recorded on a Thursday. I'll go out on a Friday, and by this time next week, a lot of the speculation will be fact. If there is changes to CGT to establish property, bring down CGT from 50% to 33% or 25% or whatever the forecast may be. The irony is, if there's some sort of grandfathering, you and I aren't necessarily going to be the ones who are paying for that price. It's going to be the teenagers, the 20-year-olds, and even, you know, the generation that's going through school right now, who are going to be the ones carrying the bag because they simply are going to have a harder way to figure out how to get ahead. Now, buying a home is not necessarily getting ahead if you're buying a home to live in. It's buying shelter. If you want to aspire to buy something more fancy and upgrade, etc., different story. But if we're talking about just the facts of trying to buy a home to live in, that's not going to better people's wealth. Buying investment properties over the years, over the decades, over the centuries has helped people, not just in Australia, but across the world, build wealth. And that's both build wealth to essentially build wealth for future generations, but also build wealth for their own retirement. And that's going to be a step further now if and when things change. So it's not going to hurt necessarily the generation who has invested in property. It's going to hurt the generations after this generation and the generations ahead of it. And I get the whole call about the lack of supply and the price of property and the cost of getting in. I get it. You and I get it, Phil. We grew up in households that got the pinch 30, 40 years ago. The pinch was real then. The pinch is still real now. I don't discount the fact that pinch is going to be the pinch. It's going to affect the majority of Australia to afford housing, both to buy a house, hold a mortgage, and also to rent a property. But this is not going to make that cheaper. Unfortunately, until you impact and make a decision to figure out how do you create more supply, that is really the lever that we're talking about that still has not been addressed.
And everyone knows it. It's the uncomfortable truth, which is infectious all through Canberra and all of the state capitals, is that everyone knows the problems and systemic problems facing housing affordability in Australia, but everyone's putting band-aids on areas outside of what the core problem is, and unfortunately that's the basis of it. But you know, it's this whole idea of the weaponization of property investment as a way to divide Australia and Australians, right? Which is un-Australian to do that, by the way. You saw these changes that were implemented in the Howard regime. I saw a piece on the paper the other day saying. And this is this baby boomer. Like, there's a lot of angst against baby boomers, and let's remember baby boomers. Baby boomers are born subsequent to the war, where children of baby boomers. Correct. And now those baby boomers are in their 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and older. This idea of the unfairness of the fact that they retain all the wealth because at the back end of their lives. I saw a piece that said. Most investment property, a big chunk of investment property, can't remember the stats, go and have a look at it, are owned by 60 and 70-year-olds. Like, yes, of course, they're investing. So these were the investors who capitalised on changes to the tax regime when Howard was around in the 2000s, right? Like, 26 years on since then. They were in their 40s and 50s then. Now they're in, yes, they're going to have the wealth, and that's how these things work. Now, this ongoing discussion around generational divide about, you know, is a younger person today able to manufacture under the same circumstance situation? So when they reach that age in time, there will be generational equity or equality then. Who knows? But this is where it's focused right now. So as we sort of look down the barrel to the budget in a few days' time, yes, there will be changes. You know, we can speculate what we think they are. Any given day, there's a different version of it. I think now they're saying it'll be grandfathered up until the point of when the change is, and whether that changes. And we've got to remember all these changes need to go through Senate. But, you know, the Greens will be certainly, you know, running in parallel with the Labor government to push this stuff through. So I can't see things getting blocked. But the version now is that it'll be grandfathered 50% up until the point of change, and then we'll go back to this old indexation system.
Yep.
Which was complicated and got changed because no one really understood it, and that will be the way it is.
And it'll be complicated, and I dare say, fast forward 5 years, Phil, we'll probably have a conversation about things that are going to change.
Oh, look,
again.
it's got to keep accountants busy.
Absolutely.
It's great for the accounting.
They always seem to win in line with government
they
winning.
do. Yeah, the more red tape and stupidity put into the system, the accountants
that win
remain relevant.
Winning.
And this is it. And the government goes, all right, making all these tax changes.
Yeah, your accountant will figure it out.
The accountant is the guy and girl who has to implement. They've got to understand and just go.
Mate, you and I remember COVID, first year of COVID. I mean, the amount of crap that was sat, that basically a pile of paper got sat on every accountant's desk saying, figure this out, figure out for business, small business, figure out the job keeper, job seeker, all that job saver. I mean, we forget about it quickly, but mate.
They were the doctors and nurses for Australian business during that period of time. And I tell you what, accountants will be the doctors and nurses of property investors, but they sit there and everyone just calls them up going, what does this mean for me? And again, you've got to put these things into perspective. If they change negative gearing, and it sounds as though they're going to do something. And let's remember, right, we've got to talk about this, another uncomfortable truth, and fortunately, these things are captured. The numerous times both Albanese and Prime Minister Albanese and then Shadow Treasurer Chalmers were asked, running up to the election in 2022 and then sort of subsequent to that, will you change the tax regime? Will you change negative? They were adamant that they would not do it. They wouldn't do it. We wouldn't do it. Wouldn't do it. So they've won.
2 years ago, less than 2 years ago. And anyone who's listening to
this,
that people would have probably seen, because it's doing the rounds on socials at the moment, people reposting saying this was Jim Chalmers in 2024.
Of course they're going to be doing it, right?
And mate, it's not unsurprising, but it makes you scratch your head. And we were musing over the numbers before going on air, Phil, and I think that for us is probably the big part, is that these numbers actually, in the grand scheme of it all, aren't enormous numbers. And this is the thing, is that you mentioned about 5 minutes ago that this is positioning for votes. This isn't positioning for revenue. Yeah. And when you look at the revenue, the differences, we talked about the negative gearing benefits, what the government pays out negative gearing per year is circa $4 million. What the government $4 billion is that's essentially the same as what the beer excise is per annum in this country. Yeah. And it puts it into perspective. That's what we're talking about here, people, is that it's the equivalent of what the government takes from you at the pub on a schooner or buying a case of beer or something of that vernacular, is exactly what every single property investor claims on an annualised basis collectively.
For the purpose of providing accommodation for Australians that don't own property, which the government doesn't do.
No, they do. They provide about 3%, Philip.
Yeah, this is true. Right?
3% of the entire private accommodation for people to live in.
Let's put it in perspective. So it costs the Australian government $4 billion a year in tax.
Mate, that's a great way to look at it.
In order to provide 97% of Australians
private
accommodation.
Rental accommodation. That's one of the best investments I've heard.
It's smart.
Imagine you flipped it and said, hey, look, we're all out. Now that 97% is your bag to carry. Yeah. Go and figure that one out for yourselves.
It'll be 4 times as big as the NDIS.
Right, it'd be the biggest black hole that we would never dig ourselves out of.
But no one's framing it this way. Sometimes I want to shake some politicians.
It's baffling, isn't it? Like we've just come up with probably 2 or 3 minutes worth of an argument that if you got on prime time and said the same message over and people would think, hold on a second.
Yeah, cost $4 billion. It's the best money. It's the best money the government spends.
$4 billion to house.
No. Hang on a second. That's what it cost them there. But on the other side of the ledger, all of those properties that are owned by Australian property investors actually contribute to the tax coffers.
Exactly.
And I think in the balance of things, I think the government's ahead. So it costs them nothing.
It's a revenue stream, and then they're just trying to take a little bit more, but essentially position the big bad property investor as the reason why everything sucks in this country.
And that's important. It's been weaponised.
Massively.
It's absolutely been weaponised. And I find it really frustrating. My favourite stat at the moment, I've got a couple of favourite stats.
76% of all statistics are made up, by the way.
Yes, 90% of the time. And particularly when I'm tweeting about it, it's probably 100% of the time the numbers. Don't trust the numbers, people. Don't trust the numbers. 2 favourite stats. And one is the $16 billion that we gave away to young Australians with HEX debts.
Oh, The old HEX debt. You and I have both had a HEX debt, Philip.
And I paid it back.
I paid mine back with indexation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think they're complaining now that inflation was so high. And
okay.
Blah, 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 blah. And so we wiped off $16 billion of student debt.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go.
Yep.
And that wasn't inflationary because I think every Aussie got $5,000 and a bit who had a set debt.
Yep.
So I'm sure they saved that money.
Oh, absolutely. That's been invested. It's been invested. Yeah.
So put in perspective, right? What are we saying? Negative gearing is costing Australia
$4 billion a year
for the purpose of providing rental accommodation to the third
97%.
97% of the third of Australians rent. Okay, point of one. But my favourite side at the moment, I just find it quite entertaining, is that it costs the Australian taxpayer, and people are probably sick of me this stat, but it's just give you a sense. $12 billion a year is what the Australian government loses through illegal tobacco sales. Like, wouldn't you, if you were the government, and you've already got, by the way, you've already got a policing system to enforce this, wouldn't you just go, well, like $4 billion there that we're giving away to provide an asset to people to live and make Australia good, and going, I'm losing I'm going to lose $12 billion over here annually. Wouldn't you concentrate on that? Like, wouldn't you just go, like, why don't we give this a little bit more attention? Even cut it by half, right? And look, mate, I don't mind someone getting their legal durries. Like, it's so expensive. I don't smoke, never smoked in my life, right? There's a huge amount of tax on it because they want to stop people smoking.
Yep.
Right, fair enough. Like, people can get cheap smokes. They're going to get it, and they're proper smokes as well. It's none of this filtered stuff, right? Like, good stuff, right? Good stuff. But but you sit here and you go, put things in perspective. You've got $4 billion it's costing over. Like, it's not that big. It's $4 billion a lot of money, but in the big scheme of things,
in the big scheme of trillions of
we're going to wipe
GDP.
We're going to wipe $16 billion off HEX debts.
And going back to that argument that we talked about a second ago, Phil, is that the government provides 3 or 4% of all rental accommodation in Australia. And what is 96, 97% of all? Well, it works out to be about 10 million properties.
Is it that many?
Well, there's 11 million odd investment properties or rental properties in Australia, residential investment properties. Let's assume 10 million of those are privately owned, whether it's by an individual, companies, trusts, etc. Yeah. But let's flip it. Let's say that you disincentivize it enough to say that it just doesn't make sense for a property investor to go buy it. What is 10 million properties going to cost the government to provide? Well, pretty simply, you average about, say, 750,000 a dwelling on average, call it, across all dwellings. It's pretty simple math. It's $7.5 trillion.
Just to buy all the stock.
To provide the stock to start with, not to run it on an annual basis and provide the accommodation and the water, electricity, management, all the finagling that goes with it. $7.5 trillion of assets that they would have to otherwise replace if you keep disincentivizing every property investor to say, get out of this. It's not worth your while. But again, it's mind-boggling to save $4 billion a year, which ultimately they're making more than that on CGT, and by the way,
these are the offsets that people get, not the positive, not the positive income they're generating.
Correct. Yeah, and also, but there's about $5-6 billion a year in positively geared property revenue from property investors, so they pay tax on that. But secondly, that also means that these people don't pass. A lot of these people don't pass the means test when they retire, so then therefore not on the pension. All the other things that go with it. I mean, mate, we could just keep going down this rabbit hole in so many different things.
Doesn't matter.
But it doesn't matter.
Everything is a veneer of these headlines to try and get cohorts of the Australian population go, yes, the Labor government is doing such a great job because we're sick of these wealthy Australians taking everything and getting all the benefit, like wealthy, inverted commas, wealthy Australians, just punters getting by. And again, perspective, it gets such a big headline, right? 87% of Phil Tarrant stats are wrong 100% of the time.
Yep.
Like 92, 93% of all property investors have 2 or less properties, right?
Correct.
So this headline going, well, you can only negative gear 2 properties, right?
Yep.
So that would be relevant. So 93% of the people who are investors, it doesn't matter. And let's just assume a lot of those 93% of people who have 2 properties, they may be positively geared.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? So you're talking again a slither, which is actually falls into relevance. 77% of property investors, right, fall outside of that bracket. And let's assume that of that 7%, a lot of them would also have positively geared properties. And a lot of them would also have properties in structures which aren't needed to be geared.
Yep.
Corporate structures like trusts. And you just sit there and just go, it's just not, it just lacks relevance. The fact that it gets all this information in headlines and it's only a slither of Australians. Why are they attacking a handful of Australians? Imagine if they did that on other sides, if it wasn't about wealth.
And on the flip side, Phil, I think that's the big thing that property investors listening to this should be aware of, is that it's actually not going to make much of a difference.
No.
We're talking like literally you're tinkering with the edges here. And going back to what we talked about at the start of this episode is that they're not addressing anything to do with supply here. So ultimately, if you're a property investor, should you be worried? Like, I don't see how this changes what happens in property.
You might have a different tax outcome.
You might have a different tax outcome. And to be honest with you, that tax outcome will probably change multiple times in the next decade again anyway. So I don't really factor this into how I'm going to make decisions differently or
But you would say
strategically.
that because you want people to buy property. That's what cynics
I
would
say this as a property investor.
Yeah.
I genuinely, because selfishly, I give the most care about myself and my family and my income and how I'm going to be able to provide for my family. Selfishly, that's the way we're all wired, right? And I look at this as, what does this mean for me? I don't think, what does this mean for my business or for the property investment industry as a whole to start with? Obviously, that's going to have some ripple effects of thoughts, processes, etc. But I look at it and say, does this change anything? Like the projections that I did on my own net worth and how property is going to allow me to do X, Y, and Z and why I started property investing 15, 20 years ago in the first place, it hasn't changed any of that. And I assume from your end, Phil, you're in a very similar boat. Has it changed the way you think about property investing generally? It frustrates me. It frustrates me that the government really just comes and plays this game for a very short period of time, has no real objective other than just to grab some votes and then will disappear at some stage in the next couple of years. That's frustrating, and it's a waste of government resources, in my opinion. But is it going to change what's going to happen in the next 10, 15, 20 years? I can't see how there's going to be any dramatic differences other than tinkering around the couple of % of the edges.
Yeah. And that's what a lot of economists are saying. So, you know, we're certainly not economists. But people who are qualified and educated actually know what they're talking about. Largely, that is the sentiment is that it's got to maybe shades around the edges of change for a moment in time.
Yep.
Will it fundamentally change the Australian housing market? No. And here again is another uncomfortable truth that maybe the government doesn't want to hear, is that you don't want to fundamentally change the Australian property market.
They know that.
Because 97% of all properties provided by these property investors, you can just keep, it's like a dog, you know, poke it, it cops it. Eventually the dog will snap, right, and bite your arm off. So the government's playing the game
Sounds
of
like
just
that's from
going,
experience.
but they're just like, we'll poke it, we get away with it, poke it. They're just poking, right? And they know that they can poke for quite some time before it really gets to a point where they go, whatever, and then they'll pull back because they go, we can't stuff this up. Because if they stuff up the property market, they're going to be up for having to provide all this rental accommodation. There'll be riots on the street. The inherent value that underpins our economy is our property market and our largest institutions in Australia, which are our banks, who make most of their money based on the mortgages that they provide against the property markets in Australia. They're not going to stuff with that. And they're not going to stuff with that because most of the value that Australians hold in their superannuation funds, I want to talk about super to you, is held in shares, which is probably underpinned by the property economy in some way or capacity.
Well, there's 12 trillion in property value. There's 3 or 4 trillion in actual shares and about another 2 odd trillion, 2 to 3 trillion left in commercial property.
Yeah.
That's our net worth.
Yeah.
Pretty simple.
Yeah, mess with it.
Yeah, no, well, if you can mess with it, but I'll tell you what, there'll be, like you said, there's going to be a big bite to the dog as and when you do it.
Eventually, you don't know how it's going to
respond. Here's a prediction.
But put in the context also, same thing is happening exactly in politics right now. With everyone's going, this One Nation mob over here is polling like ridiculously well against the incumbent government now.
Yep.
You know, and it's because people have been poked. There's a cohort of Australians going, I'm not happy about this.
I'm done with it.
These guys over here look pretty good.
Yeah.
You know,
well, they're just calling a spade for the majority of it. I mean,
Yeah.
not that we're going to align ourselves to certain political parties, but there has been that level of, look, we're just being too soft around certain things happening left, right and centre that no one's prepared to stand up for it. But my prediction is this, Phil, is that if and when we see the dramatic changes or any changes to the rental market, to the private property investment residential market, the thing that's been forecasted more than anything else is that if there's less property for renters to choose from, then A, competition goes up, and B, prices of rent go up. Now, we're already stretched, and there's no argument, no one's going to disbar the argument that we are paying more in rent than we ever have as a percentage of our income in the last 20 years. Rents are expensive comparative to average household income. Now, that'll just push up higher. And if it gets to a point where people can't afford to pay more, it'll essentially just mean people miss out, and you'll get people sleeping rough. And this is the reality.
This is really important.
And I can see that for me, that is a prediction, is that you will find more people just not figure out a way to actually get safe accommodation that they can afford. And these are all real things. And I think the moment this happens, and I forecast 12, 24, 36 months down the track, there'll be a backflip because these things will happen, and they'll happen pretty quickly. The stuff around people selling property and CGT being collected and all this other extra bits and pieces from negative gearing and raising the revenue, that's not going to happen. It's going to be tinkering bugger all there. But you're going to get some dramatic changes in the rental market, and that's going to affect people saying, the Greens are going to be coming back with their tail between their legs saying, we need to make changes again. I'm like, no, duh. Yeah. You caused this. You caused all of this.
I don't know what solution the Greens will have to it, saying to the Australian government, you need to provide more affordable accommodation. Well, but the developers aren't going to. So my prediction is that you're going to get all these changes, and I think you're going to end up with a two-speed market. And whether or not this is going to shape buying behaviours and habits moving forward is that there's going to be an incentivization to buy new property. Which is cool. And
that's fine.
And I'd like for us to have a chat about that, because there's a view that new property doesn't perform as well as existing
property. And there's
stats
around it as well.
So we'll just park that. We'll come back to it. But you're going to get this two-speed market of where they want to incentivize new build, and they're going to do that through taxation incentives. I wouldn't be surprised in a budget if you see some changes or some implementation or recommendations to support developers of property, because you can't have a supply side incentive over here without the inherent value to actually deliver on that supply. Phil, so you could do that, but if just give developers make it GST free or something or other.
I'm a mum and dad developer, and I've talked about it on this podcast for 3 years. Yeah. I've said, look, provide some incentive to build more effectively the same quality product, but with less tax around it. Provide some incentive, do it legitimately. Talk about tinkering with capital gains, or GST rather, for a period of time. If you want supply, give a 5-year moratorium on GST on development. I can guarantee firsthand that I've got 4 or 5 irons in the fire for developments. All of them stack up straight away then. Even if property market stalls or even reduces by 5-7% in that time, it stacks up more than it did previously, because GST is a massive barrier. Now, there's talk about, like you said, Phil, the potentially for detached housing brand new, the 50% CGT discount being maintained. So how does that incentivize an investor to go and buy it? It doesn't mean that it does anything more. It just means that they keep what they already had before the May budget. They're talking about maybe a 70% CGT discount for attached housing. That could be a bit more of an incentive, but the property has to go up to pay tax. This is the irony of it all, is that you have to have a property perform before you've paid tax on profit. And you don't do that. And if the property doesn't perform, who cares? You give 100%. You give no capital gains tax. What's the difference?
This is my view on incentivizing new property.
Exactly.
Is like going, mate, just make it free. Like, you don't have to wait 10 years for a property because of all the cost built into it. But with developers, just go GST free at a federal level, and then at the state level, no payroll tax. Imagine if they did that.
Jesus.
Imagine if they did that. They're saving. What would that
be?
If
they were genuine about it all, it's so much more.
Every builder would just go,
I've
just taken a big chunk of my cost for hiring people. So you've got to hire more people. Right, as a result of it, which means that you're going to create greater demand. You're going to train more people. Like, this ain't hard stuff. We're not economists, we're not in Treasury, but just there's 2 things there. They go, but if we do that, that means we're not going to be. Yeah, I know, but you're solving an issue and a problem.
If you're actually genuine about
long-term, ambitious, real reform. Not go, we want to sort of take away negative gearing, the evil $4 billion that wealthy. You just sit there and just go, come on, guys, come on,
seriously.
Guys. So let's talk about this new versus existing, because this is going to. So I've been talking about this idea over the last sort of 3-4 months that there's going to be softening. So we're not going to, probably isn't going to grow at the same speed as what it has done into the future for a moment in time.
For a period of time, for sure. And look, take away any discussions around what the government's doing with tax reform right now. Property's cyclical, and that cyclical nature is not necessarily, certainly rarely is it an effect of what changes in the taxation laws. It's going to be cost of money, all the other factors around
rising
CPI
interest rate time,
and rising interest rates, all those things rather are coming into a crescendo right now. So it creates two different things, in my opinion. A, it softens the market, but B, it creates opportunity to buy at a price which potentially then you're set up better in 10 years.
Yeah,
so,
brilliant. I think it's really good buying moving forward.
Correct.
But I think the type of assets that will perform moving forward is that you're going to have to work a lot harder to get capital growth in your real estate assets for a period of time.
Yep.
The market's not going to do most of the heavy lifting. So, I think we may go back, and it depends whether you can get them, but to a period where you're going to start looking to manufacture a lot more equity.
Yeah.
So like Renaults and all that sort of back in those heady
maybe
days.
freshen ups, yeah,
all that sort of stuff. That's how you'll generally move the needle on your capital.
And we were
growth.
doing that back in 2010, 2012.
And you haven't needed to do it over this last period because of the market's really shifted it. But this idea of buying new, and a lot of stock, property investors do buy new stock, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's two different types of new. There's a new apartment in a block of 200, which is right next to another block that's being built of 200, which is right next to another block of 200. That's a different sort of new. And then you've got, new developments, infill housing, a 3 or 4 townhouses on an established thing, or a greenfield developments where there's a lot of new stuff going in, which is owner occupier led, but there is a blend of investment stock in there. So these two things will perform very differently, I think, moving forward.
Completely agree, mate. And the irony is that the incentive, from what we've been told too, from a CGT discount perspective, is trying to incentivize the high density or mid-rise, higher density stuff more than the latter, which is the infill townhouse developments or the greenfield freestanding house developments, even if they're on smaller blocks. And for that matter is that's where they know they can create more property quicker. But again, it's not going to mean that property performs, because that is why ultimately high-rise, high-density apartments have never outperformed all other market segments, is that you can create a lot of supply in a very short period of time. And as the saying goes, supply is the enemy of capital growth. And that is the drama with trying to incentivize people to buy, investors rather, trying to incentivize them to buy a product that's not going to perform.
There's got to be people coming out of the woodworks trying to get the developments out of the ground, selling it hard, saying, hey,
developers,
GST,
investors,
it's got to be
CGT
free, you can negatively gear it, and you get all this depreciation.
Yeah,
and look, depreciation's not a bad kicker, right?
No, of course. It helps you hold it for 5 to 7 years whilst it goes from negative to neutral. And that's
cynical, but
Well, that is what it does.
Yeah.
In effect, that's what it does. It gives you a bit more of a leg up at the end of financial year to cover the losses that you made to hold the property with the anticipation that it's going to grow in value in time. But you have to hold that time to get there.
Yeah, and this is a great irony, right? So they're incentivizing investors to lock them into long-term millstones potentially of properties that aren't performing, that if they sold it, they don't have to pay any tax on it because it hasn't grown up anyway. It hasn't grown in value. But benefits the banks, right? Because the banks are going to be out there having to give all these home loans out on this stuff. It's like, I don't know. It's sometimes you just feel like everyone's a hamster running around a wheel.
We're all the bloody hamsters. I mean, it's.
Yeah, that's why you should put your money in superannuation, Paul. I've got a story here. I don't want to run this past you. And you may not have heard about this yet, but push to ban SMSF property loans. So here's the next thing. Oh, by the way, about, and this is in the paper yesterday or something or other, the government telling us that they weren't going to change property, they're not going to do it.
Any of it, not let alone SMSF.
Chalmers is saying that the government would build trust, saying that you can't trust the government anymore, or there's no integrity in government anymore because of the we say this on one thing and then we change our mind over here. Here's a promise that we're not keeping. Chalmers said the government would build trust by making a case for the changes. So it's going to come down to spin doctors selling a very simple message to Australians.
I told you I wouldn't, but now I am. But here's a really good reason why I am.
And it's good for you. I did it. I've done it for you.
I've done it for you.
I've done it for you, right? So
I'm a selfless individual.
So SMSF, and there again another class investment class, or I guess a vehicle which is certainly gets weaponised by the government. We want Australia to provide for the future. We've got the best superannuation scheme in the world, as long as you put your money in retail and super funds.
Absolutely.
If you're a wealthy SMSF person over here, we're going to make a half here, right?
Yeah. If you're taking the money out of those super funds, we're not interested.
Easy
in you.
picking. So the Anthony Albanese plan to restrict negative gearing investment properties, we all know that. Labor is tipped to abandon the capital gains tax. This is a story when Labor campaigned at the 2019 election to limit negative gearing investors who build new homes. It also had a policy to ban SMSFs borrowing to buy property and other assets as shares. Grattan Institute economist, this bloke called Matthew Bow, said SMSF borrowing, inverted commas, turbocharges the already generous tax breaks available within the superannuation system, especially in the retirement phase. Quote, these kinds of SMSF investments in real estate are at odds with the broader goals of superannuation savings, which should be providing a steady stream of income in retirement, not just providing a tax vehicle for wealthy Australians. Wonder what side of politics that guy sits. These kinds of SMSF investments in real estate are at odds with the broader goals of superannuation savings. So just put your money into savings and we'll give you a little bit of a return. Just put it in there and we'll give you a return. Or we'll deploy it over here.
Because we need you in the workforce longer.
We
need you longer.
Yep. Yeah. They should not be providing a steady stream of income in retirement, not just providing a tax vehicle for wealthy Australians. Borrowing by SMSFs is allowed in limited circumstances via a so-called limited recourse borrowing arrangements. That's a LRBA, which means that if an SMSF borrower defaults, the lender can repossess the property the loan was used to acquire, but cannot touch other assets in the SMSF, which is a great vehicle for wealth creation. Right?
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of, and if you're not investing in SMSF, there's a lot of requirements around it. But here's the details, right? ATO statistics show that of the 1 trillion SMSF assets, about 60 billion, what's that, 6%?
6%.
Is tied up in assets financed by this limited recourse borrowing arrangements, mainly for residential commercial property. This represents 6% of the total assets held by the nation's 663,000 SMSFs across 1.22 million members. So it's, again, putting things in perspective, very small part, right? 6%, right? And you sit and just go, why, again, is this very small cohort of people being targeted for this stuff? And you sit and just go, okay, so what happens if they ban borrowing in SMSF loans, borrowing against property in SMSF?
Well, here's one thing I do know verbatim factually about buying residential property in your SMSF.
Which I just did using you guys.
Which I also have done multiple times.
Yeah.
You can't live in it.
Yeah.
So what is it? It's you providing accommodation for someone else to rent.
Which we've just worked out we need to do. Yeah. Someone needs to do it.
You cannot legally do anything to do with this property. You can't rent it to a friend, family member, can't be a holiday home, can't be any of these things above. It has to be at arm's length a property that you buy for long-term, safe property rental accommodation.
Yeah.
And you're
never going to move back into it.
Never going to move into it, never going to do anything with it.
Guaranteed rental stock.
Guaranteed. You are guaranteeing private investment into the rental market as long as you hold it in your SMSF. Yeah. So again, like, how does this help the cost of living, the cost of rent, and the supply levels going up? If you are going to disincentivize another cohort of people to not buy established or brand new investment properties.
Now, the counter argument to all this is, if it's done at the personal level, it's bad. Like, here is an individual who's benefiting from the system, right?
You're a bad person.
Borrowing against it, they're getting all the benefits, they're getting wealthy. In other parts of the world, America, for example. America. Companies do this.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
En masse.
En masse.
Listed companies.
Single listed company.
Yeah.
So their job is that they do exactly the same thing.
Yep.
They just do it on overdrive. So they borrow a lot of money. They buy and or build and hold housing or properties for the purpose of providing rental accommodation.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same.
Yeah. You just buy shares in that business.
But you buy shares in the business,
instead
not
of
directly.
buying the property itself.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the company
Europe
borrows
has
the
many of
bills.
these similar things as well.
That's how it's created.
Yeah.
So it's all right for this to be done on the institutional level.
Yeah.
But they want to disincentivize individual Australians doing it because it's seen to be creating a divide between the haves and the have-nots. And you sit there and just go like,
Phil, question without notice.
oh, I'll take it on notice.
40 years ago,
Yeah.
30 years ago,
Yeah.
were you wealthy?
I'm not wealthy now.
But-
I've
but
always
my
been
question-
wealthy.
but
I've
my-
always been wealthy.
But
Yeah.
I guess I say this in a
Yeah.
in a bit of a tongue-in-cheek way, but when you started thinking about, okay, I've finished school, I've finished university,
Yeah.
I'm going to start a career.
Yeah.
Yeah. At that time, did you have a trust fund? Did you come from a mum and dad family household where wealth, money, everything finances was talked about, and you had a pretty clear roadmap as to how you're going to make money in the future and provide for your family? It's obviously a rhetorical question.
Yeah.
But what shits me to tears here is that you and I cut from a very similar cloth, and there's no shortage of property investors who are listening to this, or potential would-be property investors listening to this, who are in exactly the same, or have come from exactly the same position. They're not wealthy people trying to get wealthier.
Yeah.
These are average Australians who look at this and say, this is a lever that I'm trying to pull. So when I retire at 65 or 67, or even potentially later or potentially earlier, I don't want to be going to the government saying, I want my fortnightly pension, please.
Yeah.
And I don't want that to be what I'm working all these years for. That's all this is
Which you
designed
don't get
to do.
thankful, by the way. All of those self-retirees, they're just sitting there worried about what next change are going to erode their wealth. You never get thanked for it.
But like, I have not asked for anything, nor have you from the government as part of this process. I've worked within the rules and the laws to try and build a future financially. So when I do choose to not work anymore, I don't have to go to the government and say, can I have my fortnightly pension, please, to pay for my life?
Yeah.
That's all we're doing.
All of these things are attack on aspiration, right? And what happens when you disincentivize aspiration, you get mediocrity.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where we feel like, you know, and in an economic term, mediocrity would be stagflation, which is the environment we're moving into right now. High inflation and no sort of genuine GDP. Because people aren't incentivized to do it. They just go, it's all too bloody hard.
Absolutely. I
You
just
know,
get nailed every corner.
It's class warfare. And I want to understand why they want to be so, why do they want to divide? What is the purpose of dividing Australia even further by attacking and framing things these ways? I think it's just, you know, and to your point, most Australians bring themselves up by their bootlaces. You know, a handful of people might get a easy start or a nice handout.
The hot tip,
right?
they've paid tax along the way, or their family have paid tax along the way. Generational wealth doesn't come free either.
No.
You know, if you talk to people who come from money, I can probably say with pretty good confidence that there's been more tax paid in high wealth, generational wealth families over the years, over the decades than people who scrap it.
You read a story like this that have you believe that no, they're just trying to find ways to minimise tax.
Because that's what they're doing.
Because that's what they're doing.
Go
right?
and attack the multinationals of the world who genuinely are offshoring their profits, and then if you want to find where the actual tax goes.
But the thing is that the government would rather institutions come in to build and hold this stuff because they get slugged even more.
Yeah, exactly.
In
They got
tax,
payroll
right?
tax and all the other things.
Oh yeah, foreign investment stuff and like, you know, if properties help, mate, have a look at your land tax bill if you're not an Australian resident. They hit you another 6%, I think.
Dead expensive.
You know? Another 6%.
Yeah, something like that. Exy.
Yeah, I had one property that for some reason wasn't. They assume
that you live in the Cayman Islands.
They assume that, and maybe this is a certain state, but they assume you're a foreign investor until you give them evidence that you're not.
Prove otherwise, yeah.
So you've got to give them trustees and all that. So they just go, oh, here's a go. We'll hit them at the full rate
until they
tell us that they're not. And you go,
come on, man.
That's un-Australian. Most people aren't foreigners. Come on.
It's like 1 or 2% of all property that's bought in Australia is from a foreign investor.
But they'll start taxing you.
But all of a sudden, if you don't prove it, you are one of those.
You got to go in there and
brilliant.
Red tape.
Yeah.
You know what I saw today which really disappointed me? Back to the point. I was at my kid's school and they had I was reading this thing on the wall about lunchbox rules. And they're saying that they would rather kids didn't eat Devon.
They specifically called out Devon. That's un-Australian.
That's un-Australian. I instantly just thought, and I was only chatting on the way there. My girls were like, I don't know, we didn't make them lunch today. Different school. They're now in the car ordering like you order your lunch now,
Yep.
right? Rather than go to
they
the
give money in the brown paper bag.
and go
you
get your 2 pot. And I go, what did you used to have at school? Yeah, well, I only probably twice a year, once on your birthday, maybe one other time, you actually got to go to the canteen, right? And that was a big deal, and you got a couple of pies.
Maybe a couple of bucks.
Yeah, a couple of bucks, a custard tart. And they go, what, you get custard or a vanilla slice?
Yeah.
And I go, yeah, we just had Devon sandwiches every day. And they're going, they hate Devon sandwiches. But it's specifically called out Devon. And I went,
unbelievable.
This is why it's a cost of living crisis.
This is why we have, but mate, you hit the nail on the head there. Like Devon's cheap, man. It's still cheap.
It's still cheap. Go and get a
Not
slab.
this nitrate-free sliced leg ham off the bone. Don't worry about that on your sandwiches.
You
Just get back to Devon and not pre-sliced Devon. Buying the log of Devon and slicing it at home.
Yeah.
And putting it on your Wonder White with a slice of cut cheese, not pre-sliced cheese, with some dead horse and some Meadowlee margarine. That's where we're at. And if we were talking about why things are so expensive, well, we don't really do that anymore. No. And look, I'm not going to go down the nutritional campaign, but it's probably for the right reasons. But if someone wants to go and do that, power to them. Devon with sauces.
Devon,
cheese is
man,
delicious.
I think you might have. I think I may have entertained you at my house once, and you've never done this. Like seriously, like do it. If you've got posh friends, like get them over, pump a lot of drinks into them. You get your Devon roll, you bore out the middle, fill it full of mashed potatoes, right? Then you roll it really tight in plastic styrofoam, like get it hard and slice it up like that, and then fry it, mate. Every single person will think it's the best thing they've ever eaten. I'm telling you.
That's a
cost of living crisis.
That's going around a limb. Now, every single person,
mate, you would do. A lot of people just go, "I'm not eating Devon."
Don't tell them it's Devon.
No, so it's attack. It's attack on aspiration. Attack on aspiration.
Well, this is
so. What does Devon? What does Devon? Let's bring this back. What's Devon?
Bring it back.
What's Devon got to do with property? Devon is the type of investment you would make where you just get consistency, longevity.
Definitely longevity, a lot of preservatives. That's in the fridge for years.
Yeah. So look, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen in a couple of days' time. I'd go to stretch. It'd be hard to try and unravel SMSF, borrowing the side of SMSF. For shares as well, they're saying.
Well, this is it's all capital. So essentially, any capital assets, right? So this is not just. I mean, and take away SMSF. This CGT discount is talking about being applied to all capital assets.
Yeah.
So we're not just talking about property. So this is literally an attack on anyone who's investing to try and get ahead. The CGT discount, the capital gains tax discount from 50% to 33 or 25%, somewhere in that range, is essentially proposed for established property and shares /ETFs /bond stocks, whatever else you're going to buy, except for potentially brand new freestanding houses and potentially attached houses are going to be even better.
So how many
informed.
How many investors, let's assume that happens, are going to end up in a cohort of people who feel as though they're stuck and they've been misled by investing in property into the future because they bought new? How many people are going to be stuck with these properties that are really negatively geared and more issues happen, and people need to sell investment properties? They can't hold on to it. It's very expensive and they've got to put it in the market and not find a buyer. Or it's going to be significantly less than
that. Is a big short-term risk. And I think for me, that is genuinely an incentive. As much as it's not an immediate incentive, like no one's getting more money in their bank every week or every month or every year if you buy brand new versus established just because of these changes. This is only on profit, right? And maybe negative gearing, a little bit more negative gearing, which is already applied. There's negative gearing applies to brand new, doesn't necessarily the same way apply to established property. That's not really going to be tinkered with or changed necessarily. It might be capped at 2 assets, but that doesn't matter if they're brand new or established. Right?
I reckon they might just remove negative gearing from, if you buy new, that it's negative gearing. You can negative gear as many as you want.
Possibly. And that was, but mate, remembering that was the case.
Yeah.
What is it? 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Before the 2017 changes to negative gearing, that was the case. You could negative gear a property 15 times over. The same property that was 80 years old, 100 years old. That was the case. Property, just so everyone's aware, the property market between 2007 and 2017, which is the 10 years when that applied to every single property, it didn't boom. It didn't change the outcome. It didn't mean more people invested in established property versus brand new. It didn't create more supply. It didn't do any of these things. It was just simply a law that applied to investing in property to incentivize people to buy property, to provide private accommodation for property. for people rather. That's all it did. So if that applies again, it's not going to change the outcome. It's not going to mean that all of a sudden brand new property becomes this panacea to making heaps of money in residential property. It's simply not the case. What it's going to do is very little. This whole aspect is going to do very little. What it might do is it might incentivize a slight more amount of people to go and buy brand new, similar to when we saw it. Probably when we saw a lot of it film, we've talked about a lot in some of those years of probably between 2010, 2015, particularly those high-rise developments in places like Melbourne and places like Gold Coast and Brisbane. Yeah. There was a particular set of those markets for 5 years where there was way too much supply. Those markets suffered infinitely. Brisbane's only really turned a corner in the last 4 or 5 years, but most of the people who've made money in that have had to hold 15 years to make that 5 years worth of growth. Melbourne's still, you're still finding properties that are selling in Docklands, South Bank, etc., which are still only maybe 10, 15, 20% up on where they were 15, in some cases 20 years ago. These markets don't boom because of this. They don't benefit because of this. And remember, a CGT discount only applies to your profit. So good luck to you. If you've got 100% CGT discount, you don't pay any tax. You've got to make money before you've actually benefited from it. So make sure that you take into consideration the facts that established property has and will continue to provide better long-term returns because of the fact that it is typically always going to be in a lower supplied area with more demand. That's the reality.
So bringing back to SMSF, and SMSFs can be a very effective vehicle for manufacturing and preserving wealth. And I've got commercial and resi property in my self-managed super fund along with shares, which probably consistent with your portfolio.
Exactly the same, yep.
And we spoke about it about a year or so ago, this notion of there's two views towards SMSF: buy, hold, wait versus be transactional inside of your self-managed super fund, and or a blend of both. And I think you're probably of the blend version where manufacture, transact, trade up, and then there'll be a point in time when you will hold. But you've done some selling lately in your.
I have, mate, and I think anyone who's listening, they can go back. I think it was February 24. Actually, we did a podcast 2 years ago. So we did a podcast on my own SMSF journey. And just for the Clef Notes of that, I started with about 220 odd grand in my SMSF about 9 years ago, which I was in my super fund combined, myself and my wife's super fund, which we turned into an SMSF about 9 years ago. That ended up being two initial purchases in the Tassie market, 9-10 years ago. That was sold 4 or 5 years later. It wasn't intended to sell that quickly, but the market did what we wanted it to do. Went from 700 grand to about $1.2 million in assets, sold down, took 200K, ended up with about, call it 600K then after all payouts, etc. About 3 years ago, 3.5, 4 years ago, ended up pushing that into 3 residential assets across the Perth market to a value at the time of about, I think they were about 1.2 total purchase price and leverage against all of those. So kept some cash and had debt at that time of about 700 grand, a touch over 700 grand. So 1.2, 700 grand was about a 500 grand difference there and kept a bit in cash. I've recently exited everything from Perth. So I've sold all 3 assets and also bought a commercial property in between that time in Sydney as well. Sydney property still held, but that 1.2 million in those 3 Perth assets turned into 7 plus 7 plus 8. So effectively about 2.2 million. So
$1 million in capital growth.
So there was a million. There was essentially almost a doubling in value in that 4 years. Now, again, I didn't buy for the intention of a 3 or 4 year buy and sell, but I knew at some stage I was going to transact. And you can go back and listen to that podcast from February 24. And I did specifically say that I have no intention of holding these forever. And here we are 3 years later, mate. I've sold all 3 of those. Now, that 200 grand or 220 grand that I started with 9 years ago turned into just short of 600 after about 6 years, and now has turned into what is, I've got 1 commercial property I've since recycled and bought another residential property in the Victorian market. I'm probably going to buy 1 more, but I haven't bought that yet in the SMSF. But the original 220 turned into 600. That 600 has now turned into approximately $2.2 million of total net worth in value. If I stripped out what's held in shares, what's held in cash, what's held in equity across the 2 existing properties that are still in there, it's effectively about 150% compounded cash on cash return annually for 9 years.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It's crazy.
Yeah.
You tell me, and I'm happy for anyone to get on microphones to say this.
It sounds like they don't want you to
They don't want me to do that.
No, that's what they're saying.
And I will be a self-funded retiree if I didn't invest in property personally or in trusts or develop property outside of that.
Your super fund.
Just in my super fund alone, I would, from the virtue of taking these decisions and taking action, I will be a self-funded retiree because of that alone.
Yeah.
And I've got another 20 years until I'm retired, technically speaking.
Yeah, where you're allowed to.
Where I'm allowed to touch it. But because of these decisions, I won't be on the pension.
Yeah. On the pension.
But
and the thing is also, like, fortunately we live in a country where people who aren't self-funded retirees have the certainty of a pension. Now, there'd be an argument whether or not it's big enough.
Yep.
I wouldn't want to be on the pension. It wouldn't sort of provide... I wouldn't want to live on the pension, right?
My dad lived on it, mate.
Yeah.
And mate, I saw my dad's last 10 years of his life and it sucked.
Yeah, on the pension.
It sucked, man.
Yeah.
And like I helped him out for years and it was at a point where I just looked at him like that. I wouldn't say it was my motivation to not be there, but I can tell you, seeing it firsthand and seeing a lot of my dad's friends that I remember when he was, bringing them around and seeing what their life looked like in their 60s and 70s. It's not where I would want to be.
No.
I dare say it's not where a lot of people would want to be if they had a choice.
Yeah, if they had a choice. But fortunately, there is that safety
Correct.
net, albeit maybe it needs reviewing. So, but the point is that you've transacted in your super fund, which is not necessarily what your retail industry funds don't really want you doing that. They just want workers to put money into a super fund and then they use it, they get fees off it, and they deploy it, and they hopefully get a return.
Yep.
You've paid tax on the way, but it's a favourable tax environment.
Yep.
You pay 10% tax,
10% tax on the sales.
CGT inside of it. Yep. So, the government's still getting a lick of the ice cream.
Of course they are.
But it means that they might be getting 10% there, but imagine what they're saving not having to pay you a pension for 30 years, right? Like, again, you never get anyone
because
articulating
no
it
government
this
of the
way.
day gives a rat's about what's going to happen in 20, 30, 40 years' time. I mean, ultimately, most of them are going to be retired on a defined benefit scheme, by the way. A big defined
pension,
benefit, big pension, because no one's tinkering with the government's pensions.
Yeah.
And secondly, it's past their expiry date a lot of times. So, does this matter to them? Well, no. But I mean, I'd like to think some altruistic.
No one talks about how much the Australian taxpayer pays to politicians' pensions
as a percentage versus the rest of the working population. That would be brutal.
Google that. I'd like to actually see that. How much does pensions for politicians cost us every year? Is it more than the negative gearing? But even, I imagine it's a bipartisan issue not to talk about these things, right? Because you just don't want that to happen. But transacting inside of your super fund, there's got to be a point in time when you want to hold, because it is also a very effective vehicle in retirement. You don't pay any tax on the earnings when you hit retirement phase, and that can depend exactly when that is on the basis of it all. Did you find a number at all?
Mate, I'm getting something come through.
This is no doubt ChatGPT,
does not publish a single figure for the total cost of politicians' pensions, but the best available government data indicates that taxpayer costs about $45 to $50 million per year, almost entirely due to old pre-2004 parliamentary contribution scheme. So that's just that.
Yeah.
So the minimum defined, so pre the expensive lifetime taxpayer funded. So their defined benefit scheme back in the day, pre-2004, and there's no shortage of PMs who are on this right now. Minimum pension was 50% of parliamentary allowance after 8 years, increases by 2.5% per year, service up to 75%. Ministers accrue additional pensions of 6.25% per year of ministerial salary. Okay. I mean, mate, the numbers...
They're okay. They're all right in retirement.
We know they're fine.
I'm not beating up politicians. I like politicians.
Again,
I spend a lot of time with politicians. They're good people.
For the most part.
Yeah. Even irrespective of your colour of politics, you got to, they're all trying their best, right? Like some of them you go, come on, you're an idiot. You're not really reflecting, particularly people in the Senate, right?
They have to toe the line.
Who you just go, you would never get voted in.
No.
You wouldn't get voted in if you're in the House of Reps.
No.
Because you're a mad person, right?
Absolutely.
But you get a pass into the Senate, right? And, mate, there is some excellent senators, though.
Completely
excellent
agree with you.
senators
Completely agree with you.
out there who are hopefully, at least there is, there's some of them will actually go, thank God we got someone like that in the independent senators. David Pogoff, for example.
Yeah, he's getting a lot of the airtime for the right reasons.
Yeah, he's excellent. But so it's okay to transact in your super fund as long as you have an objective. So what are you going to do now? How are you going to deploy your dough?
Well, this is it, right? Like, so now I hold a commercial asset worth about 1.6 million. I have a resi asset worth about 700 grand.
What sort of commercial asset is it?
It's a retail office. So essentially, it's an office that can be used both for professional services or retail or hospitality. Cool. So multi-use, by the beach, ground floor, direct pedestrian access, small boutique block in a really high affluent area.
So it's tradable.
Definitely tradable and rentable for me. It's like I don't really have the objective to trade that. That for me was like park it, get rid of the debt, and probably have a much better income because that'll rent for $2,000 a week.
Are you paying it down faster than the requirements of the?
I'm on P&I, so that's been paid P&I, and with some of this surplus cash, I've just sold all three of these assets.
Offset.
I've got it's an 800 odd grand debt against that commercial property. Yeah. I'm going to park a good wedge of it to offset that.
So the point being, then you keep your repayments the same.
Keep your repayments the same,
and just more money's hitting the principal. Who did you fund it through? Do you know?
Macquarie.
Okay.
Yeah,
good.
Yeah, one of them Macquarie, one of them through. No, I take that back. Red Z and then
I was going to say
Blue Bay.
Blue Bay, okay.
Blue Bay.
Yeah, there's some good lenders like Red Z, Blue Bay, Granite.
Yep.
Yep. And you can put there are a lot more dynamic lending inside of super funds now where you can actually have offset
accounts. You can get higher LVRs. And again, I go back to this because I talk to a lot of clients who will come to me and say, Paul, I'm thinking about buying an SMSF. And great, look, we don't provide that advice. That goes off to the financial advisor and the accountants to do all their advice work and say, look, if you're ready to buy property in your SMSF, whether it's resi, predominantly I'm a fan of resi if we've got 15, 20 years and beyond because it's a growth play for me. And the reason why I'm adamant about leverage and by this article talking about leverage is that property in your SMSF, to be honest with you, if you don't have leverage, it actually isn't that great a vehicle. No. Like if you're getting 5-6% growth per year, you get that everywhere. Yeah. You will get, if you're unleveraged, that's where there is no value. Leverage is the compounding factor.
Which is exactly what they're trying to do.
It's exactly what they're trying to take away. So leverage takes away my ability to make money.
This is turbochargers.
And that's the point.
Yeah.
That's the point. Yeah. Like, I'm not taking risk. I haven't taken risk in my SMSF that I can't afford to hold. I bought property in areas which are 1.5% sub-vacancy rates, areas which are essentially at a bottom of a cycle, areas which I'm going to see a distinct lack of supply over the next 5 to 8 years, and I'm buying them at a price point which the LVR, based on the rental income and all expenses, is basically covered. So I'm not speculating. I could hold that property for 20 years and don't contribute to my SMSF. I don't need any benefits from the government to be able to do that. I'm not speculating. I'm buying, and if it grows by CPI with the leverage, I'm still going to be better off than where I would be if I was getting 7 or 8% in a super fund elsewhere. To the point of what I was raising earlier, you turn 220 into 2 million or a touch over. 150% compounded growth is outstanding. Now, I don't buy with expectation of that.
So it's a really important point because a super fund or superannuation, but particularly a self-managed super fund, is a real democratizing vehicle for investors. So, there is rules that govern how much you can put into your super fund and contributions, and it's the same irrespective of how much
everyone
irrespective. So you started with 250, which is probably
220,
220, which would have been at your age
average.
Pretty standard.
Combined.
Pretty standard, both professional careers before buyers, agent, land and stuff. So that's where most people start.
Yep.
And you're only able to put so much money in under the regime. And I think what's that at the moment, 27 grand?
Yeah, 30 grand a year.
30 grand, whatever the number is.
Per person.
Changes, So that's the same for everyone.
Correct.
So you've been able to manufacture that on a very neutral playing field based on decision making that you've made.
That's it. And mate, you hit the nail on the head there, Phil. I think in the sense that this isn't because someone earns X amount and another one. And yes, you can contributions could go up to 30 grand a year. Yeah. They're not talking like 300 grand a year. There is non-discretionary contributions. I haven't done that.
Yeah.
And
so you never do lump sum.
I've never done a lump sum to it. No. Look, may be a need for it in the future to be more tax effective, but I haven't done it, and it's not part of my tax planning to do it. This has been created by creative and selective property investing and being active and selecting the correct assets with leverage. and taking as little risk as I have to with my future along the way.
Well, you got to remember this podcast is tuning to people who are probably seeking very similar outcomes to us. So it's okay to talk about these things.
Absolutely, and
don't,
this is it.
Don't
right?
get caught up. Don't get caught up in the rhetoric coming out.
This isn't a Four Corners interview.
And to be fair, this article here is a bit sort of like,
don't ever pass the pub test type of thing.
It doesn't. Yeah, this is just scaremongering. Maybe, who knows? But just be careful. Decision making as we sort of enter this environment. If things do change around the tax regime, you're going to get a lot of noise coming out of certain sectors around buying new, which may be appropriate.
And it might end up being incentivized enough to say, hey, it could actually make sense.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say it doesn't make sense. If you're buying new for the sake of all the right reasons for growth, to balance your cash flow and hold for the long term, that's the reason as well.
I spoke to a guy the other day who runs a business, and they do a lot of work with property investors with dual key type properties in areas where it's identified for quite considerable growth and there's a high owner occupier.
Yep.
And you sort of you have those discussions. You go, and it's sort of balance of things. It may work for certain things if things do change, right?
But again,
the yield. Like I'm talking about yield.
The yield will definitely for dual keys. They're always going to make more sense. You go buy an established house on granny flat, it's going to make more sense. It doesn't make a difference.
So it's just whether or not new, so you get if it's brand new, you build it, you get all the depreciation benefits of it. If it's been, there's rules around this, but it gets a lot of criticism. New build stuff. I'm not talking about apartments here.
But I think the reason why it's probably got criticism in the past and likely we'll get it in the future, unfortunately, is probably not the product.
Yeah.
But it's more the motivation of the person pushing the product.
The posture and positioning of the product is the problem.
The problem.
Look at that.
This is it.
4 more P's. Posture and positioning of the product is the problem.
Heavy alliteration. Yeah. But I mean, that's the part is that if there's full transparency on if I'm going to recommend a dual key for $1 million to you, here's how much I make out of that versus if I recommend this. Full disclosure helps the whole situation very comfortably. So if someone knows, hey,
you're a developer. You want people to buy development stock.
Ironically, I've just finished a infill townhouse development in southern Sydney, and it's on the market right now. So people can go and look at it, and it's there. I'm not going to go through it because that's a little bit of self-promotion. But the reason why I brought that up is I've sold one of those properties. It's with an agent right now. I'm selling 3 of the 4. I've already sold one. You know who I sold it to? A buyer's agent.
Yeah, okay.
And the buyer's agent came to me. We had a coffee because we were talking about he does owner-occupier in the area that we've developed in. And it was more just saying, hey, I know you guys don't do owner-occupier. That conversation led to saying me, hey, we've actually got this development finishing now. Do you have a client in this type of budget looking for this type of properties? Like, ironically, yes, I do. When can I see it? I can see it tomorrow because it just finished, just got staged, etc. Walk through it. They walk through with their clients 2 days later. Within 5 days, contract was signed. I sold that property about 50 grand less than what I was going to sell it for online. Now, the reason being is that I didn't pay an agent, which was about 30 odd grand in this instance, about 35 grand in this instance. I didn't pay marketing via the agent or via real estate.com portals. It was about 8 or 9 grand in that instance.
Genuine off market.
And I genuinely didn't have another maybe 6 to 10 weeks of holding costs. 50 grand was my equation to say that's about the equivalent of what was going to be $1.8 million a side of $1.75 million. That for buying brand new and that buyer's agent getting their client to that was value add. Everyone won out of that situation.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm never against brand new. And I know, look, that buyer's agent, excellent buyer's agent, really, really polished, thorough, dotted their I's, crossed their T's. He's actually a pilot by trade, still flies commercial A380s 4 times a month from what I know.
I think I might know who you're talking about.
Really good guy, but also runs a tight ship, very small business, helps people in the right niches for the right reasons. And out of that, I look at it like that's a genuine win-win
Pilots
situation.
Pilots would be good buyer's agents.
Very methodical.
Yeah, because they're just
very process-driven. Yep.
Yeah. So, but building at scale and 40% of all developers' cost now is government taxes, levies, right? And
everything.
These are the levies that go to the state government to build the roads, to build the sewage, to build the you think the government's paying for that? No.
No, of course they're not.
The developer's paying for it. And a lot of people don't understand. Curb and gutter paid for by the developer. Contribution.
All of it.
All of it. We don't need to go back over old ground. So let's check in. I'm going to work out exactly how I'm going to frame budget commentary and analysis on Tuesday. So stay tuned how we do that. And and have some discussions around it. But next time we get together, we can sort of really
definitely break it down and say, what does this mean, Phil? Because I think it's exciting. I look at these things, whilst it's frustrating, because when we walk through the numbers at the start of this podcast to say that the numbers of what this is going to take in from a revenue perspective, etc., I think it's insipid, it's minimal, it's not going to impact anything from a government standpoint, and they're going to try and win some votes for 2 years down the track when they have an election. But between now and then, there is going to be opportunities that come out of this, and that's what I'm excited for.
Yeah, and what I would say also, just back into this, congratulations to the Pure Property team. You guys won an award at the Australian
Administrator of the Year,
Australian Buyers Agent Awards, and I think it's probably the award that you want to win in many ways, because it really gives a sense for, yes, you may have this sort of highly visible, buyer's agent, i.e. you, who is the profile, the personality of these businesses, but the real work is done.
Oh, it's done by the
team. People buying.
And I know you mentioned
scenes.
when you went through the process of buying a property in your SMSF through my team, Phil. I know you mentioned the person, Debbie, who won Administrator of the Year. She was being outstanding. That was weeks and weeks ago. Mate, I'm very proud of my team because, obviously every business owner is going to say the same thing, but I've never had a team member leave my business or go elsewhere or start a business or do anything different. My team are my team, and we're family, and I select my team very selectively. We're a team of 7, soon to be 8, and we have not grown very quickly intentionally over the years because unfortunately demand remains high, but I like that because I want people to work with us for the right reasons. And my team, I tell you what, I couldn't be prouder of them. I mean, we've won Buyer's Agent of the Year previous years, all the other big accolades as well in the REB Awards. But that one for me, having a couple of finalist nominations, I know Gerard was a finalist for Buyer's Agent of the Year in there as well. There's things that we have done and continue to do, which for me is just similar to what I was saying with that other Buyer's Agent we work with. We just don't want to be taking shortcuts and be doing volume over quality.
Well, again, we'll see what happens with the budget, but I've been pretty vocal saying a lot of people are going to be found out if markets change in the buyer's agent space.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So anyway, I'll no doubt have some fun about that. Probably not for this podcast, but a lot of people, they were sitting on their hands right now, waiting and saying, I don't want to do anything, and maybe that's not the best thing to do. Maybe it is the best thing to do, but you guys are happy to.
Oh, absolutely, mate. And ironically, this week we've had one of our largest weeks of new clients coming on board that we've had in the last 12 months. That's the irony of all this. We're recording this the week before budget and a week after a rate rise. Yeah. 2 days after, rather. 2 days after a rate rise. Right in a wedge of when you think would be one of the quietest times that we would have had in potentially our careers. We're as busy as we've ever been for the right reasons, because we're working with people who probably been listening to these types of podcasts and just educated enough to know that these are opportunity times. I'm not buying for the next 12 months. I'm buying for 10 years, and I'm trying to position myself correctly to get the outcome then. And if anything, I've known over the last 2 decades of property investment data is that when you get these uncertain times, markets pause. And it's not dissimilar to the equities markets, etc. There's good buying wedges, and this is one of those times. So yeah, purepropertyinvestment.com, 1300 985428, or inquiry@purepropertyinvestment.com if you want to set up some time with me or Aaron from my team to speak specifically about your situation, whether that's owner-occ, SMSF, or something in between. And if you're an existing client of ours and listening to this podcast as well, shout out that don't wait for us to reach out to you for a 12-monthly review, which we'll proactively reach out to you on to go through your situations. If you're thinking, hey, I know we bought 12 months ago, 18 months ago, 24 months ago, 7 years ago, and I want to catch up with you, Paul or Aaron, just to talk about my situation, the properties that we've bought, are they the right properties to hold in the future? Do the same thing. Just jump on, give the office a call. You'd already have all of our team's details. Reach out so you can set up some time and really work through what does this budget mean for you, because we're more than happy just to have that conversation for the sake of it as well, because I want to make sure our clients in particular have certainty moving forward as what the strategy is, what the objectives are, what they're holding. Does it make sense to still hold those same properties?
Sounds like smart counsel. Purepropertyinvestment.com. Go and check the guys out, and we'll be back with the next installment of this podcast post-budget, and we can do a full washout. All the noise and madness would have probably dissipated, and we can get some sensible dialogue and strategy work around it. And obviously we've spoken about some more sophisticated financial concepts today in relation to superannuation. So we're not providing advice by any means. We're just talking about some of those characteristics of investing through those things. So make sure you are getting the right financial advice to make those decisions, specifically around structure, and that would certainly start with your accountant and obviously financial planners as well. So, yes, some smart information there and general information, but if you're going to make those decisions, make sure you go to a qualified financial advisor. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.